chat you in. Sam!
Hey, Jacob.
Hey.
Messaged me a couple times. I haven't responded, so I'm saving myself some typing.
Oh. Well, I don't know if I want to publicly talk about these people in public.
All right, fine.
Well, okay.
Vervaeke and Marceau, though, we can talk about that because that was a public YouTube conversation, so it's totally kosher to publicly discuss a public YouTube video. That was interesting. I mean, a lot of the beginning, I'm not criticizing them. It takes a while to get warmed up sometimes, right? And you need to get your conversational juices flowing, and especially when you're talking about weird and obscure stuff that is often just in your head, like the Neoplatonic conception of Aquinas's view of emanation and emergence.
I don't even know if. Ooh, look here. I don't even know. You need to turn your YouTube on. I don't even. I actually wonder if Vervaeke kind of wishes he hadn't said all he said, because he was very carefully saying things which he doesn't want to offend Christians. And I mean, I thought I stated pretty clearly what he was implying, but people were like, he never said that. Well, he kind of did.
How are you doing, Jeff? I haven't interacted with you, Jeff, in a while.
Only via some group texts.
Yeah.
No, I'm doing okay. Just still working, kind of doing the open studio. I thought I'd do the open studio on Jacob's channel, where I just kind of sit here and listen to you guys talk.
By the way, I had a very nice donor. I don't know if he wants to be acknowledged, so I won't say who he is, but he paid for extra seats. So now I have extra seats available if more people want to host Just Chatting streams. Jeff, Sam, or anybody else.
Maybe. I won't say no. I won't say yes. I don't want to overcommit myself, but this is fun, and I feel like you're doing a good job. So what would the commitment be like? You say, I'm doing it Just Chatting for 2 hours, or you just turn it on and you turn it off at some point? No real.
I would like to see it, if you're going to turn it on. I would like it to be like 2 hours. And I would like to, when I only had 4 seats, I was like, okay, I want you to commit to doing at least 3 hours a month. But now that somebody bought 5 more seats, at least for the next few months, then right now I have open seats, so I can give it to people. And at least one person I gave a seat to hasn't even logged in yet. And that person knows who that person is.
There's a lot of secretive code talking.
Well, I don't want to embarrass anybody who said they might do Just Chatting streams. But yeah, when it was limited, I only had 4 seats. Now I have 5 more seats, and so it's a little bit more open, so I can just give it to a bunch of people. And if you don't do it, I'll give the seat to somebody else if they want to do it. So DM me the email you want me to send the invite to, and you will have full access over my Twitch and YouTube channels, and you can destroy me.
All right.
So the only rule I have is no unadulterated veneration of the Trinity, please.
So speaking of veneration of the Trinity, are you talking about worship of the Trinity or veneration of the Trinity? We need to keep our distinctions clear on those sorts of questions. But I thought it was interesting. So like Vervaeke was making a point that I agreed with, and part of me wondered, I mean, Vervaeke is obviously a very smart and well-read person, but I wonder how much of his ideas on this particular subject he had gotten perhaps from me, or if he had gotten it mostly from other people. I had no direct indication that he was quoting a video of mine or anything that.
Anytime you come from outside of Christianity, you look at the arguments for the Trinity and you're like, no, these don't make sense. And Christians, when they're arguing within Christianity, can so Gar says that was good conversation. I'm fine if Vervaeke offends Christians. Some Christians need to be offended in a good way, of course. But Pajot just gave a great video on the Trinity. Look, the fact is, if you're claiming to be reasonable and logical, and this is something that we need out of reason to understand, then you should be able to get a Hindu or a Jew or a Muslim or but this isn't sectarian. Look, the only way you can end up at a Trinity from the one and the many is because you're looking for a Trinity. And actually, like the conversation Harry started on my server, when I was driving, like I kind of sort of felt like I had a sort of epiphany, and what I said is, look, the one and the many cannot be solved by a horizontal hypostatic union of 3 into 1. It can only be resolved by an apophatic vertical union of 1 and an infinite many. And that is what Judaism teaches. That's what I would say Neoplatonism generally teaches. That I am pretty sure that's what Islam teaches. And Sartori, they made more sense before Maimonides turned the God into an unknowable monad. Whatever. Is it acceptable if there is any? No, I'm sorry. I'm not gonna pretend like Trinitarian BS of, oh, it's monistic and monad, and it's like, yes, guess what? Judaism for thousands of years and the entirety of the Hebrew Bible rails at great length about monotheism. If you don't like it, pick a different Bible to staple your Bible to the back of. I'm sorry. And no, actually, I'm not sorry.
Well, so I mean, I think that Pajot. I would love to talk to Pajot about the Trinity. So if anyone out there has the strings to pull that can get his attention to get him to be interested in having a conversation with me, I would greatly appreciate it. I've tried to pull the strings at my disposal with so far no luck. So if anyone has stronger strings than me, please do. I would love to talk to Pajot about the Trinity. And I did watch his video yesterday. I mean, the video yesterday was a response to his non-conversation, where he was Peterson's, Christian angel on his shoulder again.
We got a Trinitarian here. Father Eric.
Well, I thought Jeff might give tacit support too. But so Pajot was responding to the video of him and Peterson and the Muslim guy Hijab, somebody Muhammad Hijab. I feel like I'm just picking random Islamic words out of the air. Muhammad Hijra Jihad Hijab was sorry, I shouldn't do that. Maybe not. I thought that was kind of funny. Anyway, so he was talking about that conversation and then he talked about the Trinity for a while, and it was interesting because, like, I didn't think he was as sharp on the subject, at least in that short demonstration, as I might have expected from him. And this is a question that I have for a monarchical Trinitarian, if Father Eric wants to step up and defend this, because I feel like Pajot was doing you can do the one and the many because the Trinity is one and the many all at the same time. But I'm like, isn't there someone who is the source of the other two, right? And so even within a hierarchical monarchical Trinity, there's still a monad at the top, right? Basically, because God the Father is serving the role of monad, top chief monad. right? And it's just that there are two begotten things which are divine, and then there's everything else, the many that flows out. Like there's a divine many, and then there's a created many. But each of both the created many and the divine many have a monad source at the top.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I wasn't ready for this, but we'll go. I'd say the big difference is that the Son would be the perfect image of the Father, would possess everything that the Father has eternally, rather than in almost any other communication or procession or what have you, that there would be like your children certainly would possess quite a bit of you, but you can't create that perfect image because you're not designed to do that. You're not supposed to do that.
But there's still a head honcho singular source, right? And Peugeot was sort of making like the source is one and many at the same time. Right?
Well, the source of creation is one and many at the same time, but I guess it's not within the Godhead. No.
Right. So part of me was like, well, I wonder if you were to poke Jonathan on that particular point, it still seems like you have to give Judaism, Unitarian Christians, and Muslims their due by, Khalil, if Son lacks aseity, then it can't be a perfect image, right? Anyway, Dr. Andani out there, for the record, I feel like Dr. Andani's Neoplatonism is very, very similar to Arian Christianity, that went extinct a long time ago, and maybe has some modern versions that are still around. But like actual, real historical, Arius taught it, and so did his supporters. Arian Christianity was very similar to sort of Neoplatonic Islam, except in terms of identifying Jesus as one of the particular thingamajiggers.
I want to draw this out a little bit. Look, aseity being an uncreated creator,
or
right?
Uncaused. Well, because we'll use the word caused because that's the particular word.
Okay. Isn't that like the whole Kalam cosmological argument? And like, doesn't Aquinas actually make that? So like, can you be called God if you are not aset?
Well, so Aquinas, and Father Eric, feel free to disagree with me, but I'm steel manning Aquinas here. So Khalil, the Arians were right. What was I doing? So Aquinas, he doesn't say that the Father causes the Son. He says that the Father is the principle of the Son. And he says that the Greeks, as in Eastern Orthodox Christians, use the word cause. And he's like, well, that's okay for them, but I'm going to make a distinction because that's what I'm Aquinas and that's what I do. And
he made fun of that in the video we're discussing.
He did make fun of that a little bit. But so Aquinas says that the Father is the principio, the principle of the Son. But what's interesting is, so Aquinas has his ways to God, right? One of them is causes, right? Everything has a cause. There can't be an infinite chain of causes, so there must be an uncaused cause at the top. This is what we know to be God, right? That's one of his ways. Yeah. But what's interesting is that Aquinas needs to keep that the whole Trinity, right? Or else he will have proved the unique godness of only one member of the Godhead at the expense of the other two. But couldn't one ask Aquinas, all right, everything has a principle. There's not an infinite chain of principles. There must be the unprincipled principle. And this we understand to be God, except we have only the Father and not the Son and the Spirit in that unprincipled principle, right? And he doesn't list chain of principles on his ways of knowing God. So part of me feels like he's making a purely verbal thing here, and maybe a more sophisticated Thomist. And there is always, and once you think you've met the most sophisticated Thomist, there's someone there is an infinite chain actually of increasingly sophisticated Thomists. But what would you say to that, Father Eric?
Maybe this is not something I have a citation for, but if I had to put on my sophisticated Thomist hat, I would say that A cause would be a type of principle, would be under the genre of principles, and that the processions within the Godhead would be another another type, which would be sui generis. So, and again, I'm not actually backing that up with any
Sure.
citations. That's what I just came up with.
I think Joshua Sijuwade would agree with you on that one.
Well, he's a pretty sharp guy, so I feel like I'm in good company. So I'll take that. I'll take that.
But I think we are rather explicitly doing precisely what Vervaeke said, which is for historical reasons of trying to preserve the Trinity. You're trying to you're trying to preserve the Trinity. I'm sorry, and based Father Eric is based, but that you guys know where the word based comes from, right?
Is it freebasing cocaine or is it something else? I always
It's
thought
what you do to a turkey on Thanksgiving.
That's another word. Where's it at? I don't actually know the etymology of the way that based means cool in a self-assertive sort of way.
Okay,
It's all things that belong to us, right?
No, actually, it comes from video games where when you die, you go back to your base. And when you're at your base, they can shoot at you all they want. Nothing's going to happen because you are based.
The story I heard is that some rapper said it once.
I still thought it was from the self-confidence you get from cocaine, but anyway.
but ultimately you're stuck at your base when you're based.
Okay. I have no reason to doubt that.
Hey, Luke.
Luke, you can come in here at any time.
Thanking based God for having sex with your girlfriend? I have no clue what you're saying. Okay, so back to Vervaeke and whether or not he's going to repeat what he said in that dialogue, which has caused more controversy than I think he is comfortable with.
Well, how much controversy has it caused? I left a comment being a little bit snarky, like Vervaeke's right, but I got like 1 or 2 likes from it. I'm not sure what level of controversy we're actually talking about.
There was an actual like back and forth, which I participated in that got a tiny bit heated. I mean, I just called him an idiot. The guy I was responding to. Dr. Andani is here. Dr. Andani comes and goes because he has a child he takes care of. So
I have children that I take care of, except when I'm pretending to work.
I don't know. I think your kids are just a story.
Maybe
yet
so.
To see your stream disturbed by children.
Well, you see, I do have a bouncy house right here, and I think there's probably a Mr. Potato Head somewhere if I get out of the way. So, evidence of children.
I can testify that I saw 2 of Sam's kids, and his wife appeared to be very, very pregnant when I was in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Look, we have a trinity of Christian, Jew, and Muslim.
Yeah. And we even have Protestant and Catholic.
So I just hosted a whole Trinity symposium last week, actually, for my students.
I was excited. Yeah, I haven't watched that. I've seen that.
And then
Mark,
I pit them. I told them I would do this. I pit them all against each other.
Yeah.
Was there a cross-examination at the end?
Sort of, yeah. Except I started it. I was like, here, I have this problem with all your models. And then I was like, you can answer me and then add objections to like everybody else. So they had a lot of fun with that.
Right. I'll watch it for the cross-examination because part of me is like, I know what Bo Branson's going to say. I know what a Thomist is going to say. And then a Protestant's going to be completely bizarre, and you never quite know what they're going to say, except for it won't make sense. But so the cross examinations are often my favorite part of a debate.
Who was the Thomist involved? In case I might know them.
Well, it was Ryan Miller.
Ryan Miller.
Yeah, he's from the U.S., but he's doing his PhD in Switzerland on metaphysics. So yeah, he's actually come to my class many times. Like every time I need a guest talk on like Aquinas or something, he always steps in.
But I think that Vervaeke's main point was that clearly the doctrine of the Trinity emerged from the Neoplatonic milieu. And I think that Vervaeke maybe doesn't give enough credit to how much Neoplatonism was influenced by Christianity. I think some people are like, only pagans get to influence Christians and Christians never influence pagans. And I don't think that was completely true. And I think, Jacob, you'll completely agree that the Jews had more going on in the background than was often given credit. But in Alexandria, Jews, pagans, and Christians were going at each other about all these things. And you can clearly see versions of pre-Trinitarian versions of the Christian Trinity that are just straight Neoplatonic without any, qualms, like Origen is a virgin, Justin Martyr is an early version, etc. And then seemingly part of the Arian conflict is some pushback on where Neoplatonism took that development and some conclusions that it dragged the developmental process in that they didn't want to go. And then you end up with this sort of clunky thing that's kind of Neoplatonic, but kind of not. And it doesn't have quite the pure logical elegance of Neoplatonism. And it also has some difficulties with its own scriptures. And I think and the process got cut off because once it was part of the.
Speaking of being cut off,
Yeah.
taking this as a sign of divine judgment.
Did I get cut off?
Yes.
You froze,
No,
but
sorry.
I was actually just talking to somebody who shall not be named about this, and I have to say, I think despite what Father DeYoung likes to say, Christians had to deal with basically the background of my screen here, which is the fact is that these Neoplatonic ideas are so deeply ingrained in Judaism that they are in fact in our scriptures. To wit, Jesus answered them, this is John 10:34, is it not written in your law, I have said you are gods? Ani amarti Elohim atem. Like, this is a very common verse that we say in Hallel. I believe it's in Hallel. If he called them gods to whom the word of God came, and
are the gods their human judges or are they angels in a divine council?
Does it matter?
Again.
Heiser just begs the question. Heiser literally just begs the question because if
you haven't been on the Discord, we've been arguing about this, Jacob, again. But anyway,
okay, good for you. When it comes down to it, he's just begging the question because the fact is that the scripture in many places refers to human beings as gods, including many places which Christians want to talk
like
away.
Moses, right?
Moses is one of them.
And David as well.
Right. When Sam asked Father DeYoung about it, Father DeYoung retreated to only 2 instances in the Bible. And it's like, that is really, really like the furthest you could possibly go. And even those you can't talk away. And his thing was, well, if it was general, it would happen more. Yeah, it happens all over the Bible. If you understand.
Have you read this book, Jacob? It's called A Man Attested by God by J.R. Daniel Kirk.
Until 2 years ago, I cared nothing about Christian theology. and to some extent,
Yes, so this book, although it's written by a Christian, it takes an academic textual approach to the first three gospels, and it argues that already, like, the three gospels don't present Jesus as God. They present him as like the human representation of God based on a sort of a anthropology theology called the ideal human being, idealized human being. And it's this idea that starting from Genesis, right, uh, the human being properly actualized is a representation of God, not an
let's
incarnation, but a representation to the point where divine names can be properly applied to the idealized human.
let's take the Dead Sea Scrolls according to the carbon dating that vast majority of academics agree on. 100 years before Jesus, the tzaddik, the righteous teacher in the Dead Sea Scrolls, is God on earth. I mean, this is
And
really
Melchizedek is also given a divine name in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
the word tzaddik. I mean, that the Dead Sea Scrolls, I think, for a lot of people, look, I think it's a miracle. I think the Dead Sea Scrolls are an actual revelation from God. And the fact that it has pushed the idea of Moses de Leon writing the Zohar 1,000 years after Jesus to be something absolutely crazy and unacceptable to anybody with two brain cells to rub together. And yes, I am calling vast majority of academics not having two brain cells to rub together, because you still hear
You're an exception, Khalil.
because you still hear them talking about Moses de Leon writing the Zohar. These ideas are incredibly old. They're older than Christianity. They're older than Plotinus. They're older than the Gospel of John. Obviously, I
Are they
don't think
older than trees?
argues that
Well,
the Dead Sea
this is
Scrolls.
basically like this ancient. This is the ancient perennial like doctrine. I mean, you'll even find versions of it in the Hindu tradition and the Taoist tradition. This whole Neoplatonic structure of reality is a perennial truth. Just takes different clothes.
I agree with you, but again, this goes kind of into our thing of how much is U.S. Academic research being funded by the Saudis? Because
Well,
I think
it's true. It is funded by the Saudis. I mean, look how many Walid ibn Talal chairs of Islamic and Middle Eastern studies there are. They're all over the country.
and they, more than anybody, I would say, are completely opposed to the idea that this type of thing, because it's funny. I mean, I think a lot of Sunni Muslims are more invested than Christians in kind of disproving how old the Dead Sea Scrolls are.
That's what we get for worshiping truth.
Well, but how are you defining Neoplatonism? Because this is always the weakness that I think these people have when they talk about it.
That's a fair
Yeah,
question,
I mean,
Mark.
Neoplatonism as a term is pretty recent, right? Like, it's like the label itself is so recent, and it does get thrown around.
Yeah,
But
Vervaeke in particular, when he uses this term, the only commonality for the group he is identifying seems to be a belief in Plato and Aristotle. And after that, it actually breaks apart. So it's sort of like the Protestant version of Aristotelianism or something. It's not a term about a group of people that had something in common. And I've asked a few scholars about this, and they're like, they can't answer the question either. Everybody identified as Neoplatonic is a bunch of very small groups. This is how they describe them: very small groups of people that we know nothing about, and it didn't have any particular doctrine in common. So I'm not even sure this is a valid category at all.
I'll put my cards on the table. When I say Neoplatonic, I am straight smuggling Lurianic Kabbalah, and that's actually the only thing I actually care about. So
You're like the worst smuggler in the
I mean,
world.
for me, like if any worldview that has an absolutely simple principle of reality, whether you call it the One or Brahman, you have an absolutely simple quote unquote God or absolute reality. And then you have one or more intermediary realities, okay, that are metaphysically prior to the physical reality. To me, that's all it takes for something to be Neoplatonic.
a lot of people listening to this are going to say that was a lot of words, and I didn't understand the thing you said.
They should.
Well, luckily, not a lot of people listen to the streams yet, unless someone clips this and makes an issue out of it.
According to StreamYard, which actually usually undercounts, there's 18 people watching this, and that's not including the 6 of us. So as far as I'm concerned, more people paying attention to me than I ever imagined in my whole life.
To us.
Yes, that was a bit narcissistic of me. I am sorry. What's the difference between Platonism and Stoicism? Ooh.
There's actually a really good book on that I would recommend by Troels Engberg Peterson. He's a really interesting guy. That he was one of the most recent guests I had on my channel. He's a scholar of sort of New Testament and philosophy. He's a Danish scholar. He's a professor emeritus at the University of Copenhagen. And he makes the point that too many people interpret the New Testament and Christianity with a Platonic lens, and that actually if you have a Stoic lens, things, especially the Gospel of John, interestingly, he says, make a little bit more sense. But the main difference between Platonism and Stoicism would be that Platonism has sort of that hierarchy that Dr. Andani was talking about, where there is this ineffable singularity at the top and sort of increasing complexity down from there in perhaps a couple steps, perhaps 3 steps, perhaps 4, perhaps 11, right? There are different systems, but there's sort of this cascade of complexity down to where we are. Whereas Stoicism was much more what we would maybe just call pantheist, where like this was just the show, right? And God, instead of being some ineffable singularity up at the top, God is a particle that's the finest grade particle within our own existence. So God is like a spirit particle that can move around here in the show and manifest in concentrations in people or non-concentrations over there, etc. Right? So there is no realm that's above this realm. This realm just is the thing. But there are different kind of grades of fineness of particulars, and the finest particle is God or divinity or spirit that moves around. Well, anyway, Mark,
yeah, if you want to, I'm not sure that's fair. I mean, I think a lot of this stuff is one of the good things that Vervaeke did in the Cultivating Wisdom course that he did online, right, was he introduced us to this book by McLennan, who talks about Neoplatonism, but he talks about Epicureanism as the first step and Stoicism as the second step. And I talked to a scholar about this, PhD philologist, ancient Greek philologist, and I said, I don't think these two things are incompatible, like, at all. And they're not. They don't, like, and I don't think the Greeks saw them that way. I think that's anachronistic. I don't think.
Well, the Platonists and the Stoics did have arguments, right? They did debate each other.
Yeah, right. And everybody focuses on that. But I think the problem is that the ancient Greeks very much had this different view of the world that we're not accounting for. The religion came first, and everything's embedded in it. And the philosophies are embedded in the religions. And the philosophies compete, but the religious ideas compete differently. But the philosophies aren't always overlapping and just debating, because the Stoics didn't debate with everybody. Like the Stoics and the Epicureans, maybe they had debates, but there's no reason to believe that you can't be a Stoic and an Epicurean. There's no overlap where you would have a debate except around the underlying religion, which I think is where the debates were, right? They were using the underlying religion to justify why they primarily focus on the Epicurean view versus the Stoic view. But there's no evidence that I've seen that, and no one's made this case yet, that they actually just argued on, we'll say religious grounds. I don't think they did. I don't see it. I don't see why that would even be necessary.
Well,
so Tyler is giving me an opportunity to bring up my pet theory, and he, as a Greek, quotes Athanasius, I think it was, who said, "What does
Tertullian,
Jerusalem?" Okay, Tertullian. And so I have to go back to my little big thing, which is the Phoenician alphabet is the Greek alphabet. The Greeks learned how to read and write from the people who were quite likely had at least some of the Hebrew corpus. And so this idea that Athens and Jerusalem are so far divided, I think my answer to it is a hell of a lot more than Beijing does with either of them. Because when you look at Beijing or you look at Delhi, or even Rome, right? But even Rome, look, if you're using, certainly Memphis, when you're using the same alphabet, you have intellectual exchange and scriptural exchange that cannot be denied, that predates Plato and Aristotle and Socrates.
fine. Yeah. And the Phoenicians were probably those Baal worshippers from the Old Testament. They made some boats, sailed around, made some colonies like Carthage, right? And then they sort of maybe went into decline, and the Greeks were ascendant in terms of having better boats for building colonies. And so somewhere around 800 or so AD, the tides start to turn against the Semitic people in favor of these Indo-European Viking sort of people, right? And the Greeks take over a lot of the Mediterranean and, eventually get the whole kit and caboodle.
But when it comes down to it, I think you cannot deny that the ideas in the Hebrew scriptures must have been available to Greek academics hundreds of years before Socrates.
Well, certainly Philo of Alexandria makes that argument, right? When he gets criticized for being too Greek, he's like, well, look, Plato, Pythagoras, Socrates learned this from Moses, so I'm just speaking Moses in Attic Greek, right? Isn't that?
St. Jerome said that Jeremiah fled to Greece and taught, I think it was either Plato or Socrates. That was apparently going around in the 4th century. That idea. So,
and a lot of the Neoplatonists themselves would say that all that they got, they learned from Egypt, and that Pythagoras had made some spiritual journey to Egypt and come back, and that really the secrets that the Platonists knew were Egyptian in origin. So make of that what you will. In any case, the Greeks don't seem to tend to want to take credit for their own ideas. But there was also an idea back in the ancient world that the older something was, the more likely it was to be true. Whereas in the modern world, we have the idea that the newer something is, the more likely it is to be true, right? And so even if the Greeks were, what?
This is a Christian heresy, that there's this new light. No, Moses obviously had a more pure light than any of the apostles. And certainly the apostle Constantine.
Yeah, well, what about Jesus? And this is the thing that you see over and over in the New Testament, particularly in the Gospel of John, implied that Jesus had access to a light that Moses did not, right? And that there is a new level of resonance of divine revelation in Jesus that is consonant with but surpasses Moses.
And I defy you to find Jesus saying any such words, even in the Christian Bible.
I think he does. I mean, someone greater than who does he say? Does he say Moses or does he say
Abraham, he says.
Abraham. Well, but they're even in the Synoptic Gospels, Jesus will say and hint at that sort of thing.
From everything I have seen, Jesus would not say that he provides a greater revelation than Sinai, because obviously the revelation of Sinai was from God himself and not some mere angels. I thought we agreed 20 minutes ago that Platonism is perennial. Ugh. So the word perennial itself has a, I think perennialism has a very particular meaning that many people are reluctant. I'm not sure what I think of perennialism.
It's a perennial problem, is what I say.
Perennialism seems to be like trying to provide a standard for everybody. As we got these 14 competing standards, we need one that fits everybody's needs, and then they just provide a 15th standard.
It's a form of universalism. Yeah.
And the Unitarians are as susceptible to this perennial problem as anyone. And perhaps in some ways, the Unitarians were sort of the first to really invent kind of the modern thing that we think of as perennialism and universalism.
Okay, let's.
This is different because it's in Latin.
The perennial philosophy, also referred to as perennialism and perennial wisdom, is a perspective in philosophy and spirituality that views all of the world's religious traditions as sharing a single metaphysical truth or origin from which all esoteric and exoteric knowledge and doctrine has grown. A more popular interpretation argues for universalism, the idea that all religions, underneath seeming differences, point to the same truth. I do believe that ultimately, because truth is truth, it must.
Here, click on 3.1. Could you go back to that Wikipedia page and click on subsection 3.1?
Yes, I could. 3.1.
Right. You see, and you notice what's the first section, right, on perennialism is transcendentalism and Unitarian Universalism, which is the New England version of this, right? Ralph Waldo Emerson, his father was a Unitarian minister, right? Was a pioneer of the idea, and he was one of the major figures in transcendentalism, rooted in Romanticism, biblical criticism, Schleiermacher, Hume, all the other sorts of things, right? And that, at least in my experience, is where this idea sort of roots from, is that sort of American specific version of perennialism.
My problem, obviously, I think Judaism is true. Not my word, Dr. Muslim Guy said that. So it is possible Dr. Andani was the person who brought up perennialism. Ultimately, I think Judaism is true and everything else is a lesser truth. And so I can't say all things have equal truth to them. And I think that becomes the New Age problem that a lot of people chafe at. And I personally chafe at. I don't think Christianity is as true as Judaism.
And that's basically Catholic doctrine, but you just put Catholicism where you just put Judaism. So,
Yeah, I mean, Jesus does say he's greater than Jonah. Someone greater than Jonah is here. Someone greater than Solomon is here. The Samaritan woman at the well asked him, "Are you greater than our father Jacob?" Doesn't say it explicitly, but the obvious implied answer is yes. He calls himself greater than Jacob or greater than Abraham.
Do I have to pull up the 13 principles of Jewish faith?
You could, but I think it's pretty clear that all of the Gospels, not just John, have Jesus claiming supremacy over Jewish prophets before him.
13 principles of faith I should actually put them on screen.
That's not going to refute what Jesus said.
Where's a numberation? Moses and Torah. where's a good enumeration? There we go. I believe Moses.
Even have the 13 principles memorized. This is embarrassing.
In Hebrew, I kind of sort of do, but not in English. And yeah, it's only kind of sort of. Where's Moses?
Just like me forgetting the 7 sacraments.
Don't even speak it, Father Eric. Don't even speak it.
I might be thinking of Yigdal. Okay, yes. I believe with perfect faith that the prophecy of Moses, our teacher, peace be upon him, was true, and that he was the chief of the prophets, both those who preceded him and those who followed him. I believe with perfect faith that the entire Torah that is now in our possession is the same that was given to Moses, our teacher, peace be upon him. Those are the two that mention Moses. And until you show me evidence that Jesus said anything that controverts the 13 principles of Jewish faith, I'm going to claim him as a Jew.
But
yeah,
Jesus,
he was a Jew, absolutely.
He was a Jew.
But he does, of course, claim to be greater than Moses. I mean, first chapter of John, it's, the law came through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. And let's see, I'll find.
Quote me Jesus.
All right. I mean, I already quoted you Jesus saying that he was greater than Solomon and Jonah.
Yeah, but did the historical Jesus say that, or are you just assuming like the absolute truth of the scripture you're quoting and the account is historical?
One argument at a time, gentlemen.
I don't need to assume that they are absolutely true to say that they're historical. So, I mean, I don't think we have any evidence better than the 4 canonical gospels of what Jesus said and did. And I take them to be true unless there's a very good reason. And I don't think any reasons really have supplanted that.
I am making an internal argument against Sam. Find me where Jesus says he's greater than Moses. Then I'll believe you that Jesus was a heretic. Until you do, Scripture.
Yeah, I think
yes, Mark.
So I think it's worth thinking about why is it that people like Vervaeke and others are using Neoplatonism, and what is it that they're trying to accomplish in doing all that, right? Because that, to me, is the far more interesting set of questions.
Before Vervaeke started using the words Neoplatonism, I was trying to use the word Abrahamism, because ultimately what I think Vervaeke is trying to do, and what I am also trying to do, and what I think a lot of people in the West are trying to do, is say, hey, you know what? Our culture actually has a primal base of belief that we've been arguing between Jews and Christians and Muslims and lots of other people who are involved in it, including our New Age Buddhists and our supposed New Age Hindus, that is just far more valuable than what is provided by any other civilization, including the Chinese, including the Indians, including which are actual civilizations, but inferior civilizations. And they don't want to say we're Western so chauvinists. But I will say quite clearly, every civilization which traces its roots to Judaism has a superior version of the truth to any society that does not. And that's what I mean by Neoplatonism.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I see it is Vervaeke's justification for his projects of written art. And I see it very much as a way to say, oh, well, Christianity would work, except it went horribly wrong somewhere. For some reason, it could be cultural cognitive grammar. It could be dogma was his early one. He's backed off on that, although he comes back to dogma occasionally. It could be, he lists a bunch of things. But I think ultimately he's just trying to justify fixing the religion, right? Fixing the Christianity, roughly speaking. And that seems to be the only reason why anyone's using this. They're saying, no, it all came from here. And if we go back to the beginning and we just fix it, then we'll have the perfect religion.
Well,
which is fine, but all he's doing is carving up Christianity into pieces and dealing with them all separately in a very scientific fashion. Right?
Well, I think that was what Vervaeke's point was to J.P. Marceau, that I might state more bluntly than I think Vervaeke did out of respect to J.P., was that he was basically saying, like, hey, clearly Christianity was intertangling with Neoplatonism, and that was part of where the Trinity came from. But then the Christian discussion of the Trinity got basically put off limits by the kind of melding of church and state that caused there to be councils that condemned and excommunicated anyone who, what he said, anytime anyone tried to actually explain the doctrine of the Trinity and come up with a version of it that made sense, then they were told that they were wrong, and so the Trinity is true except any explanation of it is false. So what he's saying is that has like hampered Christianity's ability to move from what he would call ontology into intelligibility, right? Which is basically what he means by saying we make statements about how the universe is, and that explains how we can make true statements at all, right? And how we can be true. And that because this has to do with the Neoplatonic questions and Trinitarian boundary setting has made this discussion off limits in Christian circles, we can't have this discussion anymore as Christians. And so we need to abandon those limits again. I think that was basically what Vervaeke was trying to say to J.P. Marceau.
Garth makes a very good argument, and I have to agree. He says, I think that something important to note is that Vervaeke is also a self-proclaimed post-nominalist. Could it be that a Neoplatonist perspective is being used to remedy nominalism? Look, we have a lot of people who keep on talking about being pre-modernists because they want to define themselves against the postmodernists. And that's why I keep on using the term post-Platonic. And frankly, you don't like the name post-Platonic, Mark?
No.
Okay, we're going to have to discuss that because I want to know why. But the real fact is, the problem here is the postmodernists are correct. Nominalism is obviously false. What do we do now?
Yeah,
Well,
and then just
nobody holds a nominalist position. Like, that's insane. And I think that Vervaeke actually explained this when he talked on the meaning code with Wolfgang Smith, right? That was a great conversation. And the thing that came out in that conversation is the reason why he sees nominalism everywhere and is shocked, utterly shocked, that Jonathan Peugeot isn't a nominalist. And I was kind of like, I've never even met a nominalist. What the hell are you even talking? I've never seen one anywhere ever. Never talked to, right? Is because in science, they're all nominalists. Oh, fair enough. All these elite scientists that are publishing and pushing the way are nominalists. That seems to be true. Like Wolfgang Smith was like, absolutely.
Mark, come on. Vast majority of people presume nominalism.
I've never seen any, but you can't hold that position.
Can we
It's
define
not-
nominalism?
You're right though. You can't really hold that position, but I feel like it's just part of the culture. Like even like when I first met my wife and I suggested to her that like red was a universal, right? The very idea of even color being universal was like, what do you mean? No, it can't be. That's not how it is. So I think the contemporary culture makes people just lean toward nominal, unthought, uncritical nominalism. Every clubhouse atheist.
No,
let's actually define nominalism. What is nominalism?
Nominalism is the belief in no real patterns, roughly speaking. The patterns aren't real.
And they're only words that we give to things
I don't think that's quite
convention.
right.
No, I don't think that's accurate. That's not what nominalism is.
It's the
It's
patterns
not just denial
don't
of
actually the patterns don't actually exist in the thing. They're only projected onto the thing by your intellect, right? So the patterns exist in your mind, but you are drawing all of these things together into a category because your mind is creating that category, but there's nothing in the thing itself, which I think if you're a reductionist materialist, like that's what you believe.
You have to.
Except then when you go to
you
talk
arrive
about
at
the
that.
laws of physics and say that these things are true beyond our observations.
Well,
And then we build something based off of those laws of physics and assume it's going to work, right? That there's an inherent belief in that these things are more real than my mind when I do an exercise like that.
Richard
Yeah,
wanted to.
and you can really see the contradiction. And because I was just watching Nathan, the geonesis guy, talk to, I don't know his name, but it's a smaller channel, 5K subs. The guy's into Viveki and Peterson. But like he was really grilling Nathan on his philosophical beliefs. And like Nathan denies like the correspondence theory of truth. Like if you ask him what truth is, he'll just say truth is a word that we've all acknowledged culturally to use, and we sort of know what it means, but we don't have an actual grounding. And he'll say something like propositions that bear truth don't really exist. It's all linguistic representation, right? And then like once the host starts asking these questions of, okay, then why do theories of physics appear to map on reality? Like, isn't there a tie between them? Like, you're seeing Nathan had to jump through all of these ridiculous hoops to try and get it to work, but it doesn't work, right? But because we're so obsessed with the idea that we just project patterns on the world from our mind, and it's all socially constructed, etc. You commit yourself to that position, but you have a hard time defending it. So that's sort of how it plays itself out.
Yeah, now that was Vervaeke's point in the talk that he did on the meaning code. Like that was his precise point. And he sat there point by point and said, this can't be true because it's a contradiction, because it's right. But if you think about it, because that doesn't work effectively, what ends up happening is that's where the deep-seated postmodernism comes in, right? They're just like, oh, no, it's all interpretation. It's all arbitrary interpretation. All arbitrary, it's the same statement. It's not, so I wouldn't call it nominalism, right? And that's where the problem comes in, is that people are just being postmodern and people are misreading it as some weird nominalism. But there is nominalism in the science, and I think that was really clear from that particular conversation that he did on the meaning code.
Paul, if you're stuck in Burbank Airport, it's less than half an hour away from here. You could just come to my office.
Yeah, or you can just come to Biola. Either one.
Oh, Richard, you're going to Biola?
Yeah,
we should meet up. We're in Los Angeles.
We should. Yeah, I forgot about that until a couple of days ago. I've been meaning to mention it to you. But yeah, we're really close.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we should meet up. My office. Just let me know. Actually, yeah, you're not that far away from where I live. I live on the west side. So
yeah, and I have a car too. So it's really easy. Yeah.
Cool.
Jacob has a car that he bought with his blood money.
I hear about this.
Yes, Hasbro ended up buying me a car. Okay. Look, we can say nobody is a nominalist. And yeah, if I go up to anybody and I say, hey, are you a nominalist? They're going to look at me funny. But when it comes down to it, I think our society does presume a nominalist position. And when you start talking in non-nominalist terms, they kind of think you're weird.
I don't look in again. I don't actually see that, Jacob. What I see is that we're postmoderns, and people like Vervaeke defend postmodernism. So rather than blame the actual thing that is happening, which is postmodernism, he blames nominalism. And then he finds it in the science, which is a fair trick. But scientists, the people outside of science, don't actually interact with the world in the way that the scientists clearly do, that he's rightly criticizing.
Mark, we have to give the postmodernists their due. They have actually criticized and found the faults in something that is.
No, you're right. We have to give them their due, right? What their due is hell, because that's what they create. If they don't create anything else, they're purely destructive. There is nothing to postmodernism. It doesn't create or build anything. It cannot, by definition. It is only parasitic. Period. It doesn't deserve any credit for being parasitic. This is a 3-year-old trick. I have a video on this on navigating patterns. It's a trick that the 3-year-olds use. If you ask why long enough, you'll find a valid critique. Literally 3-year-olds do this.
Can postmodern can postmodern deconstruction be used to deconstruct false positions, including itself?
No, postmodern deconstruction doesn't even exist. It's a pretend concept that can't be done by a human.
You're such a nominalist.
With that, I'm going to go eat supper.
There is a by a father. There is actually such a thing as criticism, and when you show faults in something, it is not completely worthless. There is, look, the sword is that burns away, and I'm mixing metaphors all over the place. That burns away things which are faulty and clears away the rubble and shows you where you are wrong. Has a has an actual Paul, you're the only sausage eater here. Has an actual value to it. Protestants.
Okay, Jacob, that's fine.
You know that, Mark.
Look, the idea of critique is older than the postmoderns, and that isn't what they're doing. They are doing the Kantian critique of critique, which is also older than the postmoderns because Kant is the one who came up with it. So again, to give them any intellectual credit for anything is ridiculous. They're not smart. They may be articulate, but they're idiots. They're Sam Harris all over again, right?
Here's my problem. Because earlier you were talking about Vervaeke undercutting Christianity, cutting it up into pieces, etc. Now it seems when I listen to you that you assume that Christianity and other church religions are easily inhabitable by people. That doesn't seem to be the case. And the reason why they're not inhabitable is because of, let's say, the temptation of a postmodern spirit to make that kind of framework uninhabitable for people. So my question is, how do you remedy that? And how do you make the traditional religions habitable? Because when I think about talking to someone like Nathan, and when I'm in the comment section of his videos, arguing whatever, like I have no way of like rationally arguing for religious positions because the what is it called? The apologetic stuff is all bunk. It doesn't really work. And like, wait, how else are you going to like try and like invite postmodernists and skeptical atheists in? Like, I don't see how I can do that. Through argumentation or whatever. Like, so that's sort of the problem of like it's not habitable anymore.
Okay, Paul says Nathan has become a stock character in this little corner. So Richard has a very good point, but I have to say, going back to what Mark was saying, Nathan is the embodiment of the midwit spirit. It's people who are
The what
smart
spirit?
enough to
Sorry?
sound what?
The what spirit? Sorry?
Midwit. Somebody
Okay.
who he's smart enough to sound smart, but he's not smart enough to tell the difference between pseudo scientific drivel and actually smart people and actual concepts, and to understand when he's saying something stupid, right? And this is the problem with Sam Harris. This is we have a plague of midwits that are posing as our intellectuals. And so why is Christianity not inhabitable? Because when I talk about Sir Roger Penrose, who is an actual brilliant cosmologist, right? I've heard of him because I've listened to Unbelievable with Justin Brierley.
Right. Yeah.
But guess what? Sir Roger Penrose is on Jordan Peterson's channel and Justin Brierley's channel, but he's not being celebrated the way midwit Neil deGrasse Tyson or any of the other intellectuals are, right? And so, yes, we are plagued by a spirit of midwitism. I've been trying, maybe calling it Ormond syndrome. You don't want that either. But look, part of our problem is the midwits, and we have to be able a plague of midwits. Yes.
Well, but I think there's an archetype here that we're missing, and I actually asked the Symbolic World Facebook group about this, and I think they came up with a few good answers. There's two archetypes that we're not talking about enough. One of the archetypes is the evil genius, because we're still worshiping genius and this idea of who sounds smarter, right? Like I think that's a bad plan, by the way. Like I don't think you should try to argue with people about Christianity verbally. Like the propositional is not going to work against a postmodernist, because postmodernism denies propositions as being able to carry truth. But the other archetype is the archetype of the articulate idiot. And you can make arguments for Sam Harris being intelligent. Okay, you can't make those arguments for Nathan. I'm sorry, you can't.
I have seen a lot of these articulate idiots. They're people who, while they're plugged into usually a very strong cognitive network, right? And they are plugged into a strong cognitive network, they themselves are really bad at actually thinking about things. And Gavin, if you are a midwit or not, the same way anyone with Dunning-Kruger actually, or imposter syndrome, actually checks. You take an IQ test. I'm like, okay, so how do I feel comfortable saying I'm one of the smartest people in the United States? Because I took the LSAT and I got a really high score.
Right. Yeah.
And it's an IQ test. And I had to stop like my false humility and be like, look, I have a really high LSAT score. Take the LSAT. If you get a really high score, which I guarantee you, midwits like Nathan Ormond, like Sam Harris, they don't test well.
Yeah, well, and this is a good point, because I was watching where the first is Glenn Lowry and McWarrior talk about the fact of like how is Kendi, even like Kendi, like how is he like a top caliber political commentator when if you gave him an IQ test, like it's very possible that he's not on the upper end of that spectrum. And it's the same problem. Like I was watching, I forget his name, but someone commentating like on all of our political leaders. It's like the same problem. Where if you test many of our politicians, then it's like not likely that they're going to be on the upper end.
Look what our society is doing. Look what our society is doing. Roman, I'm sorry. I want to see Sam Harris's GRE test scores, because you have to understand he was raised to take, and he had all the tutors in the world, and he I want to see his GRE score, and I actually would rather see him take an LSAT, because the LSAT is much more of an IQ test than the GRE is.
Do you just study for the LSAT though, or for the
Passing.
It helps to know what the questions are like, but when it comes down to it, especially the logic section,
Right.
you can't study for that. It's just a pure IQ test.
Right.
But passing is usually above average. Passing doesn't convey that you're that much far above average.
Right. It's like passing. Look, if your LSAT score is above 170, I will stop calling you a midwit. Very few people have a 170 LSAT score, but look at what we are doing in the University of California and the Cal State system, right? Have decided they are no longer going to have standardized scores. And I am not kidding. I am not exaggerating when I say 50 nuclear bombs dropped on each, so there are 50 campuses in California. If you dropped a nuclear bomb on each of the campus on California, you would not do as much damage to human society as removing the IQ requirement for getting into certainly the UCs, but even the Cal State system, because it's going to be a plague of not only midwits but idiots.
Yeah, but I think I want to address this question that Gavin asked, right? Like, I think there is a way to tell if somebody's a midwit, and I think this is where the steel manning the argument idea has some merit, although I think it can go awry. If you understand a point by yourself for yourself, in other words, you're actually intelligent, then you can recapitulate that point or restate it using your own words. And if you can't do that, the odds that you're a midwit go up. So there's a very easy test. Now, one easy way to do that without using something that somebody learned really well by reading the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which, by the way, you should use rather than Wikipedia, plus a Wikipedia article, plus a Medium article, right? Because people do this. I've seen people do this. I've watched them do this, right? Is to give them your argument and have them restate it. Because now they didn't use any of those three sources, right? And so you know automatically they're not necessarily a midwit.
Okay, so the Vervaeke, so Sam commented on the Vervaeke Marceau discussion, and in the comments there was a disagreement between Sam and a different Sam, right? And I got involved in it, and some not even midwit accused me of the genetic fallacy, and I responded by going, no, you obviously don't have no clue what the genetic fallacy is. And I gave, in my own words, a definition of the genetic fallacy. I said it's when you say that something, because of what its genesis is, it is fallacious. And his response was to quote me the Wikipedia definition of the genetic fallacy, tell me that my definition was wrong, ask me where I got my definition, and then misuse the genetic fallacy, even though he just quoted the genetic fallacy, right? And it's like, okay, you're too stupid for me to respond to. You
that's
legit. Skills.
That's
right. You don't have the reading comprehension skills to understand the argument.
But
what happens on the internet when you say something so stupid that people don't want to respond to you? He got like 3 likes on his, he destroyed me because he said something too stupid for me to respond to. So I responded to him saying, no, just because you said something too stupid for me to respond to doesn't mean you win. But this is part of the Ormond syndrome on the internet. When you say something so shockingly stupid that intelligent people, like, for example, his supposed argument that combinatorial explosion doesn't exist,
Yeah.
right? It's so shockingly stupid that people who actually understand what's going on are like completely dismiss you. But I'm sure he has like thousands of fans who are like, see, he called Vervaeke on,
Yeah.
and
Right.
Vervaeke was not going to say, wow, that's a really stupid thing for you to say, Nathan. You're absolutely wrong. And if you actually understood the words you were saying, you wouldn't be saying them. But since you're stupid, you did.
But that's part of, I think, Richard, I just want to address your question too, right? That's part of your concern, right? This is what we're saying, right? Is that there is no way to condescend far enough to explain to that person how dumb they are, right? That's and that's what you should say to them, Jacob. But that what that means, Richard, and the example that Jacob just gave is perfect. You cannot win playing that game.
Right.
You cannot win playing the I'm going to argue with you game. I'm not saying don't do it and don't try. I'm saying that ultimately it's a failed game. The way to win the game is to prove that participation in the Christian story yields superiority in some domain. Like maybe they're just nicer folks, right? That's the argument I made on when I first talked to Vanderklee. I think it was our first conversation. Right? That's the way to win the argument, is to say, you have all these propositions. And look, this is where Vervaeke's work is perfect. And I mean that literally. It's perfect. When he says there's a participatory knowledge. Why is that perfect? Because highest value, I have a video on that, obviously, the highest value for Sam Harris is knowledge, right? Very clearly. He doesn't care about anything else. And what Vervaeke says is, Vervaeke doesn't say knowledge isn't your highest value. He says, oh, there's the realm of propositional knowledge for sure. And knowledge is really important, but there's also the realm of participatory knowledge. And have you thought about that? So what that does is it doesn't challenge their worldview that knowledge is the thing they should worship, but it does open them up to different types of knowledge that they could engage in. And that's where they lose to Christianity or Islam or whatever. Like they'll lose to a religion every single time the minute they're opened up to the participatory knowledge argument. Because there's no winning that argument. You have to actually do it.
Now let me just say before, like, I just want to voice that all of this talk of stupidity and IQ does make me uncomfortable. I understand its validity, but like I see, and you conceded this, Mark. Like, we should still be in these conversations. I do want to keep the line of communication open with someone like Bacon. And I went to his channel and the video of him and Vervaeke and sort of went through flaming everyone. And like on a couple of days reflection, I felt bad about that. And so I went into his call-in stream and apologized, because I felt like here's the disagreement. I think this is a very important disagreement. And you saw this with Vervaeke too. From Vervaeke's comment on Paul's critique, Vervaeke and Jacob responded, but Vervaeke said, "Please don't assassinate Nathan's character." Right?
See, okay.
Now, where's the line on that? Like,
okay.
I get that we can say that, oh, it's factually true that Nathan is a midwit in the sense of his IQ or his ability to articulate points, etc. But should that be a relevant fact that we bring up? And I think I'm not convinced.
No, it has to be. No, it has to be. No, listen. This is very important. I went over this with somebody. So somebody came on to the Vervaeke server the other day, and he said, "You know what, Mark? I'm very upset because I feel like you condescended to me." And I said, "No, I absolutely condescended to you. There's no question about it." And I'll tell you. And I told him why, right? And I'll explain this again. I had to. Because he came in asking me a question as though I was he told me, I saw this. I think you would know something about this. I really want your expertise. Those are his words. So if I'm the expert and he's not, and he knows it, I have to bring my language down to his level to draw him up to mine. I have to condescend. There's no choice. Okay, that's not a bad thing. Now, if it hurts your feelings, maybe I did it wrong. Freaking fair enough, man.
Okay.
Right? But the fact that that is actually has to happen in order for me to help you means that there's a possibility that this idea that I shouldn't have done that is all in your head, because you kind of asked for me to condescend to help you with something. This is not a bad thing. So you have to know that he's a midwit, and you need to condescend to go down to his level to help him. It's very relevant.
Okay. Let me respond from a very different frame, which is the hierarchy frame. Okay? Look, this channel, there's a reason why this is the background of my let me pull it up. There's a reason why this is the background of my channel, right? Because of the twin commandments: you shall love God and you shall love your re'echa, your colleague, however you want to translate that, like yourself, right? These are twin commandments which are incredibly important. And being able to see that each human being is made in the image of God is a very important fundamental in my religious framework. So, yes, I have to see the value of each human being qua human being.
Yeah.
That does not in any way negate the fact that, and it negates the idea that because I got a high LSAT score, I'm somehow more human or more godly, because I obviously am not, than somebody who gets a lower LSAT score.
Yeah.
But what it does say is truth matters. And if we are living in a Dunning-Kruger world where people who think they are smarter than they are, when somebody like Nathan Ormond, who is a midwit, talks to somebody like John Vervaeke, who is possibly the smartest person I have ever encountered, one of the wisest people I have ever encountered, and we have actual intellects who deserve the respect. It's relevance realization. It's sense making to recognize I should be listening to somebody like John Vervaeke, not some idiot like Nathan Ormond. And his IQ is higher than 85. He's not technically an idiot, but somebody with an IQ of 150 who condescends to somebody like John Vervaeke is acting like an idiot. And we don't have a good word for, well, I guess foolish, right? So the word foolish, there's intelligent and idiot, and there's wise and foolish. Whoa, we got
a big fish.
I cannot abide.
What?
This is, I don't know how long you've been at it, but for the last 5 minutes, I've seen 3 men gossiping like women about
no one's been gossiping here.
That way?
talking about Nathan Ormond is not gossip at this point.
No, we weren't talking about Nathan Ormond. We were talking about how to have a discussion with these people. There was an objection by Richard.
You don't have a discussion with these people.
By
You
Richard.
show them the gas
We called
chamber.
them midwits.
Hold on. First of all, I have to say, my number one disagreement with Jordan Peterson is we don't have too much femininity. We have a lack of femininity. We don't have female scolds going around shaming people like Nathan Ormond and doing the social.
Why do we not have that?
We do not have enough.
Why?
We do not have enough.
Why?
What?
Why? Why don't we have it?
Because we've told all the women that the best thing you can do is act like a man, and
We
that you
told them.
shouldn't. Yes, society.
Hey,
has
not all of us are.
like men. What?
Not all of us are Kanye targets, Mr. Federetti.
Look, women for a very long time, women have a much better sense
It's
of
the collapse of the shadow
social
matriarchy.
relationships
sir.
than men do, and relational aggression, and they have for a very long time, until very recently, they have been involved in putting men into their place in the hierarchy properly, including as scolds, including humiliating them. And somebody like Nathan Ormond needs to be told, I want to see your LSAT scores or STFU.
Dude,
Wow.
there's this thing, it's like real estate, but it's internet. And the only reason he's on anyone's radar and not a sub 1,000 channel like most people is because digital knows this is a fucking cool name. That's the only reason he's on anybody's radar whatsoever.
He's doing the anger and resentment porn, and that's very popular right now. And
not among anybody who's relevant. Let's exercise some relevance realization here and talk about what we're building and not a little
midwits are relevant.
Well, no, I think
are relevant.
Yeah, and
midwits are precisely like Richard said, the people who are making Christianity uninhabitable. The midwits are a problem.
That's just so hard for me.
Christianity is so uninhabitable because what? It's not a cross.
No, because we're focused.
I mean,
we're
if you
focused
can't
on
handle
one.
midwits, how are you supposed to handle?
Because okay, I'm not comfortable with that. I think you guys would say the midwits say to the Christian that your metaphysical beliefs are stupid. I responded to a couple of those comments in Nathan's video. Like, there's a lot of atheists who are still in the racist framework who think all religion as style belief is stupid. And I don't know, I feel like that still has to be addressed. Like, you can't just dismiss that and call them midwits.
Well, No, but we're not dismissing them, Richard. No, but it's important to look. I've made this case before. I'll make it again because I don't think people are hearing what I'm saying. The criticisms that Nathan leveled at Vervaeke are valid, but he couldn't make them stick because he didn't do the work. It's that simple. If I had, and I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to criticize Vervaeke. If I had criticized Vervaeke, I have the goods. I know his work. There are easy hits you could go after to prove Nathan's point. So this didn't do Vervaeke any good, and it didn't do Nathan any good. Like, nobody learned from this. It was a big fat waste of time. But to the larger issue, the problem is not just the midwits. The problem is that we are because we're focused on quantity, because we're focused on IQ and clever arguments and propositions. Vervaeke calls this propositional tyranny, and I've got my doubts about whether or not that's the right way to think about it, but he's got a point, right? Mm-hmm. Because of that, we're privileging this argumentation style over the quality of the argument. Nathan and other midwits.
This privileging of the argumentation style. Who is doing it? Where is it being done?
Well, I think everyone's doing it.
Please example.
Look at YouTube. Look at Nathan's channel. Why is anybody watching somebody be angry and resentful towards other people?
At what point
do
we acknowledge that we are not the lowest common denominator? And we can't say we are doing it because they are. Oh, also, here's some savings throws. Please choose survival, social, wisdom, or heart.
Wisdom.
Survivalists with a 14. Socialist with a nat 20. You're fine tonight. Wisdom with a nat 20. Holy smokes. And heart with a nat 20. What's the statistical probability of that, Mark?
It's just that well, it's high quality, and that's what we need to focus on, quality rather than quantity and proposition. I look, I want to recognize and acknowledge the quality of Paul Vanderklay's pain right now, because he can't be here with us in this
That's
dialogue.
gotta hurt.
I think that's worth it. I think that's an important quality argument right there.
But all right. Let's, since you brought up Pastor Paul Vanderklay, I'm seeing him currently as like our homeroom teacher. You know, we all go to class first thing in the morning, homeroom class. It's Vanderklay's episode. And then we go about our day on the internet, learning whatever else we learn. But he brought up that we have the issue of onboarding, which apparently you guys ran into with Moundrell. And I don't think us quibbling about midwits, because midwits are the ones that need to be onboarded. Because like the ones that aren't midwits are probably in a midwit coma from being around midwits.
I agree. Look, Grip, I agree, right? But again, and this is back to my argument with Richard, like if you don't know their midwits, how are you going to onboard them? Because you have to condescend. You literally have to get to their level to bring them up the ramp.
No,
we first need to onboard kindred, and we don't really have kindred onboarding either.
I agree. We need to account for all of these people.
All right,
who are the kindred? Sorry.
For me, that's people who were like gave up on life and crawled into video games and got pulled out by something and decided to I don't know, sing a redemption song.
Yeah. No, I look, there's all kinds of onboarding we have to do, and we have to get that onboarding in such a way that multiple different people can get onboarded. I agree with all that, but if we don't recognize the difference, video
on navigating patterns, you have like, welcome to this corner of the internet. I'm navigating patterns. Here are the patterns going on in this corner of the internet.
Well, look, and look, I mean, I'll announce it now.
No, I'm saying that's a no.
No, I have one, but look, I'll announce it now. I promised Catherine that on the Consciousness and Conscience YouTube channel, if she made that channel, that I would try to do a video summary of the meaning crisis, right? All 50 episodes, or 52, actually, I think these, right? And so I actually
want to go through that too, but with a different project outcome. I actually plan on going through all of them as well. Do you want to do that together, even though we hate each other?
We can do that if you want. We need a summary of Vervaeke's meaning crisis thesis, and maybe an onboarding into his science of meaning, which I think is the important part that he brings. Yeah. And so I'm going to actually try to do that. And I don't know if I can. I've been sick as a dog for 2 straight weeks every afternoon, but I'm going to try to do that. And I don't know how long it's going to take, because, and I don't know if I'm going to have to go back through the 50 hours or not. Because if I have to do that, it's going to take a really long time, because it's 52 hours of material.
Okay. Well, hold on. Let me offer everybody who's in the meantime, until you complete your summary of the Vervaeke meaning crisis thingy. I'll give you one part is Pethkow's care agency project that he and I did together. I'm sure he's going to fetch the link if he's still here right now. And the other part is the content of your character determines the levels of consciousness you have access to. And if you take that and work it like a Zen cone, it's enough to get you started until Mark finishes his summary of the Vervaeke meaning crisis.
Yeah, I think that is a good start. I'd like to been contemplating like a Vanderklay intro playlist. And it actually wouldn't be that long. I think you need like God 1, God 2, Tom Holland, what's the other one? What's Dr. Jim's thing? Like the one eye, the lab leak stuff. And then there was one other one I had. Religion S, Religion W. And then like that's all you need really, and then you can just go in. Okay, so like what I went through with Vanderklay, because whenever he mentioned something I didn't like know, I just did Vanderklay Tom Holland and watched it, or that I solved my problem. Right? So I feel like, I don't know, that's not that hard, but I guess if people want a playlist where it's all there and they don't have to go back, then maybe that would be useful as well. And maybe like a 10-minute video
Okay.
on the top of that would summarize all of that, and that would
Now,
be good too.
as if I've been trying to do community building and distributed cognition experiments this whole time, let me say to you, okay, so there is a playlist, a Welcome to Paul Van der Clay playlist. It contains 10 videos. There's 10 slots for each video. We create a Discord channel where everybody puts the one they think should be included, and the one with the most emojis makes the playlist.
No.
Otherwise, who do you defer to in the determination
Grim,
of what the playlist is?
Grim, look, here's the problem with Paul Van der Squirrel is his attention. Because if he could just sit down and take the list that everybody already has of concepts and do 20 minutes on each, he'd have 10 20-minute videos that would summarize it.
I am not here to discuss the problem with anybody. I'm here to discuss solutions and plans to build this community.
Okay, I missed everything because I actually do have to work sometimes. But
I have a Patreon.
Me too.
We have a list.
Let's go back to a problem and me addressing all the people who want to be nice all the time. No,
like me.
No, you can't be nice all the time. There is a problem with saboteurs and midwits, which we need to address. And if we don't address the midwits, then we are lost.
So here's my answer to that. I agree, but I think we have to watch them because you agreed with me that we want to keep the channel open with these people. So I think you need to watch the manner in which you address them. Because if you do it in the wrong manner, like we did here, I would contend if Nathan here
the wrong manner is not insult that.
Hold on. If Nathan here is calling him an idiot, saying that he'll probably get a low LSAT score, etc., I feel like we can say all of those things in more implicit ways. But if he hears that, then he's just like, oh, F them.
He needs to understand he's not as smart as he thinks he is.
You don't get to decide what other people need to understand. That's the Lord's job.
No, I do. No. See, this is the thing. If we're going to have distributed cognition, then yes, I do get to say, no, this is wrong, this is right.
Yeah, you get
then
to.
do it in a response video with clips.
I considered it.
I mean, if you care to do it, otherwise you're just giving him rent in your head. They used to say.
Okay, fine. I guess I'm going to have to make my Ormond syndrome video.
But let me be honest with you for a hard moment, okay? Because this is not nice or easy to say.
What?
Like, to me, you're a midwit, as evidenced by using the Dunning-Kruger phrase.
Why?
Because the real phrase is lemon face. Because the Dunning-Kruger effect was based off of some guy who thought putting lemon on his face would make him invisible. And you're supporting the patriarchy by calling it the Dunning-Kruger effect. It was really the man, the scientist, the lemon face himself. And if you knew that, you wouldn't just be social signaling to smart people who think they're smart because of the lemon face effect when you say Dunning-Kruger.
Graham, you're just saying words in order to say words.
That's what it would sound like to a midwit.
Look. At the end of the day, B.F. Skinner proved this by trying to disprove it. You need negative feedback. Period. End of statement. People respond to negative feedback. If you only give them positive feedback, it's not going to work. And if I was just about to address this, if their fragile little egos get shattered, then maybe that's what they need, right? But the truth is important. And if the truth shatters your fragile ego, I'm really sorry, but I don't care. I'm just never going to care. Sorry.
I don't know.
Hold on, Richard, I want to make a point.
Yeah.
We have a lot of Christian doormats who think that the way to be Christian is to not offend anybody. And guess what Jesus did? He offended everybody.
I get it. Okay, so here's the question. And this is an important question. Is Nathan more on the pharisaical side of people who need to be offended, or is he more on the marginalized prostitutes, lepers side?
Why do we
Wait.
Because
If we're gonna continue to talk about this particular topic, I have to leave because I'm done.
okay, yeah.
But I have one story to finalize it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
When I was a small child, they took me into sex education class, and in that class, the main thing I remember is this little meme the lady put up on the screen, and it said, "You don't have to blow out other people's candles to make yours shine brighter."
Yeah.
Right.
And that is all that's all we're doing right now. And that's all that guy does with his entire channel.
That's not true.
As far as I can tell. Because hedonism is empty and he has nothing else to offer but criticism of others.
No, Grim, you're just plain wrong.
Oh, no.
There are times when you have to confront things which are untrue because the fact that they are not true is a problem. If truth matters, then false things.
What is the big untruth that needs confronting, sir?
What?
I will help you confront. I'm ready to confront this great untruth. What is it?
That Nathan is at all smart.
Does that like?
And lots of people. Look,
because I'm not talking about people. I'm not doing ad hominem.
Yeah,
I'm not being a part of this, Jacob. I'm sorry.
I agree with
This is the problem. We need ad hominem at times. We need a hierarchy. We need to bring people down to their own level, and we
don't think so.
reduce them from.
No, because how? Because here's my question: if they think they're at a higher level, and you bring them down, that doesn't change their perception of themselves. I feel like they need to recognize it themselves, right? And the way you do that is
so this is a huge problem with a hierarchy where we allow people to self-identify. You can't just allow people to self-identify where they are in a competence hierarchy.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that he needs to apprehend the truth of his place in the hierarchy himself. No. It's not arbitrary self-identification.
No. Richard, look. This is really easy, right?
Okay.
All you have to do is tell the truth. And if that truth shatters someone's ego, that's too bad. This is not about saving Nathan or anybody else or Sam Harris or anybody. I don't care enough about those people, to be quite honest, to spend the time to try to save them. That is not my mission. It's not important.
I care enough about them to tell them the truth.
Right. I care enough about them to tell the truth.
Mark says he doesn't care. I actually care about Nathan. And I think it is damaging him and everybody who has a relationship with him to think that he is smart enough to say the things he said to John Vervaeke. That's damaging.
We're on the same page, Jacob. I agree with you. I don't care enough to save Nathan. I'm not trying to save Nathan. It's not my goal. But I am trying to own the truth and try to be true to the truth, right? True to those ideas at the sacrifice of somebody else's ego. And my own. I'm totally fine with all that.
Like the weird thing is that I think if all three of us were talking to Nathan, we would all say the same semantic content to him, right? But when if the way you to deliver the same semantic content is me, is interpreted by Nathan as hostile and unfaithful, like you know what I mean, non good behavior. Now I think you're banging your head against the wall and wasting your time.
Richard, look,
Yeah.
how come he gets to insult Paul Vanderklay as a pseudo-intellectual? Yeah. So is that a pure evil? If insults are pure evil, then he is pure. You're telling me he's purely evil.
I will tell you why we shouldn't get to insulting. Because I'll grant you that he insulted.
Sherry, you are absolutely wrong.
You should join us.
First of all, Sherry, you should join us. But second, you're absolutely wrong, because this is actually what the word scold, right? There's a reason why it is a gendered archetype. Yeah. Because women would scold men like Nathan for their misbehavior. And the problem we have in society is we don't have women regulating relational aggression in ways that they uniquely are capable of doing. Yeah. So I have to disagree with you completely.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I think it's, again, it's really important that we hold true to the true beliefs. And,
I'm not holding true to the true beliefs.
No. Look, and Richard, I actually think what you did was correct. You scold all of them and then you go back and apologize. I think that's perfectly fine. But you need the first step. You can't do just the second step. And this is where Christians, in my opinion, quite honestly get lazy. They don't do the first step of criticizing, and being prepared to be wrong in criticizing. I mean, Chris Petkow does an excellent job of this, right? Speaking truth and doing it poorly. Yeah, that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
Right? And look, I want to address it again, because CW didn't seem to hear this the first 17 billion times I said it. Nathan had some good high-level points. It's just that he didn't have the goods to bring. It's not that there aren't good criticisms of John Vervaeke. It's that he couldn't bring any of them. And I've got a freaking list, man. Like, this is easy.
Isn't that just him being lazy, though?
I don't think he's lazy. No. Nathan is not lazy. He's just not as smart as he thinks he is. Garth says, to extend the branch to Richard, we need to work on how we communicate our message without sacrificing the truth to build communities to preserve the truth. I think we need to get rid of this idea of pacifist doormat Jesus, where pacifist doormat Christianity is the only way, and it is a pure evil to insult someone who needs to be insulted. Yeah, there is a time for insults. There is a time for scolding. There's a time for putting people in their place, because you will not have a good competency hierarchy if you cannot look at the competency hierarchy and say you are incompetent.
Yeah. Now, can I tell a story?
Please.
And this involves working with children. Now, I'm not saying that Nathan is a child. I'm not making that comparison at all. So, but now,
I'll do it.
Yeah, I'll do it.
But I worked with first districts this summer. So what the experience I had was that, at least for me, scolding kids for stupid behavior didn't work. And maybe that's because I'm incompetent at scolding. Because, my experience of my critiquing of Nathan was that I was giving into vice and giving into lazy forms of critique, right?
Okay, part of the problem here is there's a vast difference between interpersonal relationships and group relationships, right? Okay. So when I am trying to convince someone to change their behavior, sometimes insults works, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the person. But we are talking about somebody who is prominent in a group.
Yeah.
And what is necessary to make clear to other people in the group, lots of people who are just trying to figure out how the hierarchy is that, guess what? Paul Vanderklay is not the one with the pseudoscientific dribble. It's Nathan who's using pseudoscientific dribble.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of people that I don't blame at all who don't have the vocabulary that Mark and I do, or you do, Richard, who, look, there's a lot of people who are going to not understand when people are talking above their level, right? And at some point, you have to personally attack a particular person and say, you're an idiot.
Or just stand your ground. I mean, a lot of this is about standing your ground. And look, again, if I stand my ground around the truth and it hurts somebody's feelings or shatters their ego or destroys their life or traumatizes them forever, that's too bad, because my loyalty is to the truth, which affects more than one person. And so if we lose one person along the way to the truth, I'm totally okay with that. Okay? I'm sorry, but I am.
I want to address Sherry because A, Sherry should be up here in the conversation because it's an important voice. B, because she's saying something that a lot of people agree with. This conversation would make Nathan very happy. I would scold someone like Nathan, but by not giving him any attention. It's not just about Nathan, though, Sherry. It's not just about Nathan himself. And look, like I was saying before, in real life, when I'm talking to somebody and they say something really stupid, for example, like this YouTube commenter said, do you even know the Nicene Creed to me? Like, as if I don't know the Nicene Creed much better than he does. If we were in a room together, the other people would look at him like, you just said something stupid, right? Or let's say somebody like says, do you know Hebrew like to me, right? If we were all in a room and somebody claimed like, do you even know Hebrew to me? Like, everybody in the room would be quiet and that person could understand that what they said fell flat. But the problem on the internet, and this is actually what I'm calling Ormond syndrome, is that when someone says something stunningly stupid, everybody becomes quiet, and on the internet, as opposed to in real life, that silence is interpreted as opposed to you just said something stunningly stupid as, ooh, he just destroyed everyone. Nobody could respond to him. I can't respond to your stunning stupidity because you are incapable of understanding how stupid you are, right? So when John Vervaeke responds to Nathan Ormond about his combinatorial explosive thing, right? Most people who are watching may not be able to understand, oh, what actually happened was this guy tried to make a really smart critique and he said something really stupid, and John Vervaeke was really nice in kind of going, you don't know what you're talking about. And so the rest of the we end up in an environment where midwits get put in the same place in the competence hierarchy as somebody like John Vervaeke. And that is destructive to our society. So unless you have a better way of dealing with Ormond syndrome, then somebody like me putting out a video, this man like making fun of him, then give me a better solution, because silence doesn't work on the internet like it does in real life.
Yeah, and you have to get Joey. You have to understand that he is bad faith. What he does is he uses those interactions, right, that he's having with John Vervaeke to make an anger and resentment video that gets him 1,000 views. Okay, that's his purpose. His purpose is not to. If his purpose was to engage with Vervaeke's work, he was quite capable of doing that, and he did not do so. And the combinatorial explosion thing is, if he studied computer science and he doesn't understand combinatorial explosion and how it's relevant to consciousness and computer science, then he needs his money back. Okay, because I've studied computer science and it's right there. Like, it couldn't be more clear. Period.
Okay, we have the alcoholic in the room. The alcoholic gets to speak.
Hi. What are you Muppets talking about?
Ormond syndrome.
I wish you wouldn't do that, Jacob. Really.
I don't know what that means.
Do you have a better name for it?
No, I look, I think the articulate idiot is the right archetype to point at.
Yeah.
And not give him any more credit than he needs, because he's just a troll and we shouldn't
The articulate idiot. Fine. We're discussing the articulate idiot.
Now, yeah.
I'd rather be Armand than Armand.
So I get you guys' point about the equality of people in the hierarchy that should not exist. I think that's valid. Now, I think in my head, what the ideal is that we make our critiques, right? We don't hold back, right? But it's just for me that the fact that I was able to go into the call room and he didn't immediately assume I was a bad faith actor because I like Paul Vanderklay was good. That's just a good thing to me, right? Now, I guess that you assume and that he does really look like he engages in bad faith discourse, but yeah, I at the end of the day, I just want to keep the channel of communication open. I think you guys are wanting to do that too. So yeah, we'll just continue to opponent process and talk.
Yeah, and I think Jacob's main point is you need a signaling method to call out these people, and that signaling method is of a certain type, and otherwise, the people we're being unfair to are not the articulate idiots. The people we're being fair to are the other people watching, trying to determine who's on the right side. It's because, again, the real problem is Vervaeke didn't get a good criticism, and he needs one, but he didn't get it.
Let's look at our articulate idiots channel. Wheeling Paul Vervaeke back to the retirement home.
Yeah, that wasn't good. But
really,
Jacob, but Jacob, you would make a title.
The exhausting nonsense that is PVK's Christian pseudo-profound drivel.
See, but I have a bit of grace for him because of his life story. Like, just the fact that he's gone through PVK. Okay. That he's gone through PVK and now he's fallen out of PVK. Like, it makes sense to me that he has a bit of ironic annoyance. No, that's not a good way to put it. Has a tendency to make fun of Paul. Because when I dropped out of atheism, I had a tendency of making fun of atheists and making them look ridiculous and wheeling them off into retirement.
Well, I have trauma in my life about articulate idiots.
Right.
And it is really, really traumatic to me that my society is being destroyed by articulate idiots.
For sure.
And so I would like the same latitude to make fun of articulate idiots as you give to an articulate idiot when he's insulting someone that actually deserves a lot more respect than he gets.
Yeah. And I grant that to you for the same reason, because your life circumstance makes it more likely for you to do that. So yeah, it's fine. Now,
Okay, thank you.
If I had my way, we would do no making fun things. But I'm
Look,
boring.
this idea that making fun of people is a pure evil, it's, first of all, it's not something that we ever apply to everyone. We always apply it to our friends, but not to our enemies.
Yes. Yeah.
And B, it's just purely false. There are times when you need to make fun of people, including yourself. Like,
Yes.
self-effacing humor is
Yes.
actually a good thing. But there are times when you need to go on the offensive and cut people down, because that's how status hierarchies work.
No, I agree. No, I've had it. I probably won't do it because I can't sit myself down and make videos. So, like, I've been wanting to answer what Paul identified as the heart of the critique, of nature's critique, and address this worry he has about us fascist right wingers, right? Because I think that's the most ridiculous part of it. But so yeah, like I agree. I agree that we do need to go on the offensive, because to me it's really concerning that Nathan de facto thinks I'm promoting fascism because I listen to Paul Vanderbilt and Jonathan Peugeot. Well, that's a bit ridiculous.
Well, I don't like the equivocation between making fun of somebody, which, I mean, I have never made fun of Nathan, right? And just pointing out the truth. Like, it was a bad critique. It was made by a known bad faith actor, right?
Yeah.
And it's that simple. And those are facts that you can verify independently. You don't have to take my word for it. You can just go look.
Yeah, I wasn't equivocating. I think it was Jacob who said he has a right to make fun of Nathan. So that was why I was addressing that. But
Look,
is that accurate, Jacob?
I wouldn't do it if I had personal hostility against the man. I really wouldn't. I feel like it's necessary to do it, partially because our society has fallen into a pattern which is in fact quite destructive.
Yeah.
Of allowing, like, so one of the videos which stayed with me and like really gets under my skin was, I was watching Jonathan Haidt talking to a psychology student about the psychological harm of the things he identifies in the book, The Coddling of the American Mind, right? Or also when Jordan Peterson was talking to a member of parliament in what was it? It was some Scandinavian country, right? And this undergrad psychology student says to PhD social psychologist Jonathan Haidt, who had written a very good book, and he was addressing the 2016 Association of the APA, the American Psychological Association, right? She says, well, I think, and just disagrees with Jonathan Haidt. And if you don't understand how destructive that is to our society, or when whatever the name of that member of parliament was, who was disagreeing with Jordan Peterson about what is destructive to our society, right? This is actually destructive to our society, to put on equal footing midwits with geniuses. There are people who are saying important things, and we can't have relevance realization when we have idiots being put on equal footing.
Here's my question.
Important intellectuals.
Is that like, how do you say that?
Hey,
so
okay.
Yeah, sorry, Karen, go ahead.
Gotta watch my Breaking Bad.
Bye, Chad.
Like, so I think we can agree that based on what you've said, PhD, if you have a PhD, if you have a college degree, that is an indication of intelligence, because you've called Harris a midwit, who is a doctor, I think, and you've called
He has a
Peterson
PhD in neuroscience. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So we need to establish that. Now the question is, what do you say to someone who says that your evaluation of geniusness is either subjective, culturally based, religiously based, etc. Because
Well,
because Nathan is making the same accusations that we're making towards him back to us, right? And
look,
so
there,
there's a problem whenever that.
there is definitely a problem here, and part of the problem is the fact that our universities are in fact handing out PhDs they should not be. This was one of the things that really pissed me off when I was in law school, and my ego wouldn't let me graduate. And I spoke about this in my conversation with Eamon and Catherine, like, because I saw how, like, that diploma meant absolutely nothing as far as whether or not I actually would understand the law or not. And it bothered me enough that, and I am that type of, like, petulant child, that I dropped out of law school rather than actually getting my law degree like I should have. And that's totally on me, right? I am 100% that type of petulant child, and this is me admitting, yes, I am human. I have subjective biases. Our society should be in the business of actually believing in meritocracy, of actually testing meritocracy and competence. And we have people, and I can pull up the discussion that Glenn Lowry, one of the smartest intellectuals in the world, he should be getting all of the attention, and he's not, was having with a professor at Yale Law School who wrote a book against meritocracy. Right? This is Yale Law School, actually, and I can pull it up. Like, we have a society that is actually arguing against meritocracy. So, yes, meritocracy. There's all kinds of problems with knowing where to put people in.
Jacob, hold on. Look, the bottom line is we have a bigger problem. Right? The problem is, if you're going to fight a propositional war, you're going to lose in a postmodern era. You're going to lose. That's not the battle to fight. The argument takes 10 seconds. We're living in a world where a man with a PhD in neuroscience doesn't care about the lives of dead children in a basement when he knows who owns the basement. Okay? This is an ethical problem. Okay? So if the argument is, well, the PhDs are smart and important and we should listen to them, then the fact that he said what he said and defends what he said disproves that thesis. And that's how you land that plane. You take the nuclear weapon, you put it under their ass, and you hit the button. That's how you kill them. Because there's no argument against that. What are they going to say? What are they going to say when the smartest people and it's worse in that case, because this guy pretends to know something about ethics and morals. And if the guy you're following claims to know something about ethics and morals and literally says, I don't care if Hunter Biden had bodies of dead children in his basement, he's not an ethical or moral agent in the world. And if that's your argument, he's disqualified. Problem solved. That's how you win those arguments.
Here's my point. Look, in this book, called The Republic, by point.
Yeah.
all of the problems in our current democracy are in 4 pages of that book. All of them.
Yeah.
And that was 2,500 years ago. How do we solve those problems if they're inevitable?
No, you don't solve them. But this
exactly.
is the point. This is the point. You don't solve them, but you also don't roll over when the enemies come to the gate. And that's Jacob's point. You don't roll over and let these people pull this bullshit. It's that simple.
The perfect cannot be the enemy of the good. Yes, we will not achieve perfection in meritocracy. Yes, you're absolutely right. We will not achieve perfection in meritocracy. What bothers me is we're not even trying.
Well, yeah, because I don't think, can you even have meritocracy in a democracy?
We had it. Yes. We had it.
But
it's been done. We know it works.
But
look, we don't need to have an aristocracy.
Is it sustainable? Is it sustainable given the nature of democracy? Because essentially,
not if you don't sustain it. You got to stick up for it.
Richard, you're moving on to a very different discussion. But yes, Mark is absolutely right that if you're not even aiming at meritocracy, if you're debating the value of meritocracy, there's something like this is a problem of values hierarchy. Do we value merit over non-merit? Apparently not.
Well, yeah, I think Socrates basically argues that implicit in the values of democracy is a non-emphasis on meritocracy.
Okay, so this let's move away from the Greeks. Let's move to the Bible, right?
Okay.
The value of individual human beings is really, really important.
Okay.
And I believe that each human being made in the image of God has a certain value.
Yeah.
At the same time, I believe that there is an actual hierarchy. And this is why, despite the fact that I think 1 Corinthians 9 is a speech by the devil, I think 1 Corinthians 12 is actually a very important and true part and of the Christian Bible. And we need to understand that different people have different functions. That that doesn't remove the fact that there is such a thing as a king and a prophet and a priest, and there are different roles in the body of humanity. And Nathan's needs to be brought down at least a little bit.
We agree. I agree. Now I do have hesitancy in believing that, because I think I'm too not humble, but humble is the only word I have for it. I'm too humble for my own good, and I'm even hesitant to say that Nathan and people in this corner of the internet are not on equal footing. Like, I hesitate.
Look, he's obviously competent in certain ways, and he's obviously smarter than the average bear. That's simply true, right? And yes, we have a lot of people with imposter syndrome, and we have a lot of people with Dunning-Kruger, lemon face syndrome, if you want to call it, whatever. The fact is that if we care about a competence hierarchy, we need to, in fact, hold people accountable for where they are in the competence hierarchy. And we need to actually care that someone like John Vervaeke be held up as the intellectual that he is, and a more important part of our distributed cognition than somebody, whatever you want to call them, and articulate idiots, right? Well, and in fact, I think actually what we should call them is articulate fools, not idiots, because part of what they're lacking is wisdom. The problem is wisdom.
But the fool has a positive role in criticism, and the idiot does not. That would be my argument against that. I'm prepared to be wrong because this is new. This is new framing.
I still think we should go back to Ormond syndrome.
No, you need to abandon that. You need to focus more on Sam Harris. Like, let's get away from
Sam Harris syndrome. Should we call it Sam Harris syndrome?
Harris syndrome. I'm fine with that. No, I think
Harris syndrome?
an idiot will do.
Look, part of the problem is we don't know how to name it. Part of the problem is we're not discussing the things we need to discuss, and part of the problem is we have Christians with doormat syndrome who feel like their religion requires them never to insult anyone, and it's like, hey, have you read the same Gospels I have?
Yeah.
Because Jesus says some very sharp words.
Yeah.
And not everybody loved Jesus.
Yeah, and so does Paul, for that matter, as well.
Well, Paul, it was more deserved.
I know, yeah. but if your appeal is to Christians, then you should also mention that Paul also had not much things to say, even despite your disdain. But yeah.
So Bazzani, so there is this concept of a let's in Hebrew. I don't know if, see, the thing is, the mocker has a position, has an important function. By the way, my Hebrew Bible study starts in 40 minutes. So I am going to end this at 5:45 Los Angeles time. So we have 23 minutes before I have to take a break before my Bible study starts. And everybody's welcome to my Bible study. Like and subscribe, people. And if you want to contribute to the channel, there's a link to Square.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, like, Viveki is the one being invited to Cambridge and to whatever that institute is that he perseveres on. So we should have a bit of faith, because that is a good thing. Like, he's the one and not Nathan being invited.
Yeah, but okay. Ultimately, Paul Vanderklay is not a pseudo-intellectual, and anybody who calls Paul Vanderklay a pseudo-intellectual obviously is not that smart.
I think cerebral palsy. There is enough of a new atheistic perspective in my head to understand why people think Paul Vanderklay is ridiculous. Right?
It's really simple, Richard. People don't have the vocabulary that you do. They're not as smart as you are, and they can't tell the difference between people who look. There's plenty of people who listen to Jordan Peterson, and they can't tell the difference between him and a pseudo-intellectual.
Yeah.
And this is a common problem that people, there are people who can't tell the difference between Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson. And I don't blame them. So this is, now I'm going to tell a story. There is a rabbi I respect a lot, okay? And he is really smart and knowledgeable, and his position, he is in fact the kashrut administrator of one of the largest kashrut organizations in Los Angeles, making him one of the most important people in determining what's kosher food around the world, right?
Yeah.
And I went to synagogue with him, and he refuses to wear a long jacket, which is how rabbis signify that they're actually like a class above other rabbis, right? And there was somebody who walked into the synagogue who was wearing a long jacket that he bought because anybody can buy a long jacket, right? And he had a long beard, and from talking to this man, I knew that he knows close to zero, right? And this woman walks up to the man with the long jacket and asks him a question about her kosher kitchen. When the rabbi who was wearing the short jacket, who decides what is kosher for basically the entire world, right? And certainly knows a lot better, right? Was sitting right there. Now, whose fault is it that this woman was going and talking to the guy wearing the long jacket instead of the rabbi who's the kashrut administrator of, it's like, whose fault is it? And part of the thing is, I have to, despite how much I love this rabbi and I respect him, I have to say, Rabbi, you are doing something wrong when you refuse to wear the long jacket. Because that woman should have known to come and ask you about her kosher questions. And your supposed humility, and he's a very humble man, right? But I'm sorry, it's not humility when you refuse to signal something that other people need to know.
Yeah, and it's always balanced because you have Dr. Fauci, but like, I get your point, right? And we be a light on a hill because what uses a lamp under a basket, right? So
and this actually goes back to the point with PVK and me keeping on telling him to wear a collar in his videos. Because guess what? There are all kinds of people who are wearing the collars on their videos who don't know as much about Christianity as he does. Or when I tell Eamon, Catherine's husband, that he needs to go around calling himself doctor, even though he refuses to do it, right? Because he's an actual psychologist. And guess what? There are plenty of people on YouTube going around calling themselves doctor who bought their doctorate through degree mill.
But, and that brings up an interesting question, because what that indicates is that the world is upside down. Because the reason why Paul doesn't want to wear a collar is because to some of the audience that he's speaking to, the collar would lessen his ethos.
No. You've got causality backwards.
Okay. Well, so I was going to say that now that Paul has credence in certain communities, if he wore the collar, that would be a way of turning the world right side up again, because it would restore credence to the collar. But you have to balance that, because we have to ask the question: is the kairos right such that the collar would be restored, or would it detriment Paul's message? And maybe it would bring credence to it. So.
Yeah, but you can't look. You can't know the kairos moment. I mean, John was talking about this, and I just like, you can't know the kairos moment. You can't predict it. It's bigger than you. Just stop, right? But what you can do is hold true to the truth, right, all the time, and not worry about the freaking kairos moment. And then you have a way to operate in the world, right?
You would say always wear the collar.
Always wear the collar, because when you stop doing that, whenever, it doesn't matter who you blame for it, you have now removed a signal from the world. And that signal turns out to be important. And now that we don't have that signal, it's unclear. Well, I should listen to Paul, because Paul's definitely has a lot of knowledge about Christianity and Protestantism and the history and a bunch of philosophy, a bunch of stuff, right? A bunch of stuff. Learn a bunch of stuff from Pastor Paul Vanderklick, right? But he's not wearing a collar. And so I can't convince others, right? And because no one's wearing collars and everyone's trying to be humble or more humble or humble first or whatever the hell they're trying to do and say, no, I'm going to stand on my meritocratic argumentational abilities rather than these external signals. No. Those two things have to match, because if you don't have two things and they don't match, there's nothing to match up. Now there's no way to tell. Should I be listening to this person or not? I have no way to know at all now. And that's kind of what Jacob's complaining about. I mean, I have the same criticism of Vervaeke. He should be Dr. Vervaeke because he's Dr. Vervaeke. Like this is ridiculous. Professor, right.
Yeah. Right. And it's weird because when I went over to my friends' houses when I was a kid, you called them Mr. Smith, Mr. Sims, whatever. That went away when I was 12, 13, which is probably a bad thing. And then also the fact that when you do Q&A with Professor Vervaeke, I call him John. But, and
look,
that's
this is part of the problem with Protestant. Look, part of the problem we have is our society is too Protestant, and we need to become more Catholic. And Father Eric is the person whose job it is to make us more Catholic, and which is why it's important that he be Father Eric Seitz.
Yes,
and maybe I'll start calling him Father Seitz. But Father Eric is still better than what most people do. And it's important that he does wear his collar. And it's important that people who, for their supposed, and I have to say this, it goes the same with Yosef. He refuses to take the test that would actually make him a rabbi, even though I'm sure he could, anytime he wanted to, take the test and he would pass all the tests and he would be called a rabbi and should be called a rabbi. And I call him a rabbi because we need social signaling. And the Protestant idea of a priesthood of the people, and there are no bishops, and all of this.
Here's the problem, though. Here's the problem. We have to recognize this is a cycle, right? And the cycle is that on the top, the signal, as Mark calls it, corresponds to reality. Then we go down the cycle and it doesn't. Now, we are sort of, in some ways, at the bottom, because would you call Sam Harris Dr. Harris? Would you?
I would, because ultimately part of the problem is, look, I don't think I can be as dismissive of Sam Harris as I am of somebody like Nathan.
And here's the thing. It's not just distrust in Sam Harris. It's distrust in the institution that made him Sam Harris, Dr. Harris.
So this was the thing. When he didn't understand the is-ought problem, I actually went and looked up his degrees because I figured, how could somebody has a bachelor's degree with a major in philosophy, and a philosophy major who not only still doesn't understand the is-ought problem, he's still arguing against it. It's like,
well, but look, how do we know?
Conviction.
But Richard, how do we know not to trust the institutions? We know because people claim their titles and they still don't care about dead children in a basement. And then I could go, okay, fair enough. Now I know that colleges and universities are corrupt. And without that signal, we don't know that. And that, I would argue, is why we didn't notice. Because this happened a very long time ago. Jonathan Haidt, I think, is on to this, right? And others, although I would place it further back than they do, right? I mean, I would just, follow the money. When did things become expensive? Why? Because that's when they started selling degrees as pieces of paper instead of acting as a filter for society. Now, the only other way to know that is to talk to people who are claiming their degrees instead of sneaking around like wolves in sheep clothing and pretending to be dumb so that they can then elevate themselves and say, well, actually, I have a degree, because they always play those tricks. They always go there.
Well, not doctor even extended.
See, this
Fair
is
enough.
a real problem. It's a real problem.
Yeah.
Just because you get admitted to, we need to actually fail people from,
Yeah.
and we need to actually care about competence. And
Yeah.
why do I even have to say this?
Because, like, why care about competence when I can just care about my own fleeting feelings and desires? That's why. Right? Because, like, this goes back to why I wanted to bring in the Republic. Like, because democracy is tied up with individualistic assumptions, there is no reason to sacrifice your own desires to the whole. Because you just want to do whatever you want, right?
Right.
And so,
Well,
and then where that goes, Socrates says, is that the most powerful person gets what they want, and it becomes a tyranny, which is exactly what's happening. So, here we go,
Right.
friends. Here we go
Well,
down the roller coaster.
That's the other thing too, Richard. The other way to look at this is by not accepting your title and taking your title, you're not making the sacrifice that is appropriate to that title, right? And so now we have no one exemplifying sacrifice and leadership anymore in the world. Now, does that correlate with anything, do you think? Because I think I see the correlation rather clearly. So the whole giving up of titles and trying not to be better than other people is the destruction of hierarchy and structure, because they both go together as such. And that causes us to lose a bunch of signals about whether or not our institutions are good, whether or not we should listen to people, right? Where we're going wrong. And when we don't know where we're going wrong, we can't start to go right again. And this is the problem. This is actually really important. And making the sacrifice to have a title and be a target in having a title is important signaling to the community. So it's not just one or two issues, because whenever you get to one or two issues, some idiot is going to science and fix that one issue, not realizing you didn't fix the other six. So it doesn't really matter even if you're right. And that's important.
Yeah. And Jordan Peterson, Professor, no, Doctor? Did you call him Professor?
Doctor.
Professor Emeritus Peterson. Like, the fact that he felt obligated to buy a bunch of nice seats is a good thing when he got famous, because, like he said, you have to look the part. And you have to be presentable.
And that's a sacrifice. Wearing dress shoes and dress pants and all that, I can tell you personally, is a sacrifice. It's a pain in the nuts. It's terrible. I went to school wearing a suit, coat, and tie. It was awful. It was literally awful.
Yeah. Garth actually made a good point earlier when he said a lot of the smart people are, all the actual smart people are going into trades to avoid. Honestly, it's become to a point where dropping out, and it's funny. I was actually talking last week to somebody who's the dean at of an prominent undergraduate program, and I was saying, actually, for a lot of people, dropping out has become the status marker that graduating was.
Yeah.
Because, like, if you drop out, then we kind of understand that you had something better to do than just sit there at a diploma mill and pass courses for no good reason.
Well, and you didn't see that with Nathan, right? That's a part of his story. I don't know if you know that, but, like, Nathan is going into the computer sciences instead of getting a PhD in philosophy, because it's just better monetarily. So, like, that's very common thing. So, which is too bad, because it shows you how crap our institutions are. So, there you go.
Okay, guys, this is the final 5 minutes. If you have navigating patterns is the channel.
I guess I've never promoted my YouTube channel, but I have a YouTube channel. There's no good way to find it. There's only a couple of things on there, but there's good stuff. So I talk.
Mark, I still want to hear why you don't like post-Platonic as a term.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't like the post moniker at all. Like, I think everybody keeps saying this is what comes after. You're like, this is the after what, and I don't think that thinking about the world in that way is helpful, because we're in cycles. We're in these cyclical patterns. We're not in this linear progression from thing past that thing to the next thing and past that next thing, right? So that's one. The other one is we're not Platonic. Like, that's not what we're doing ultimately. I think that Platonism is cool as far as it goes, but it's missing so many pieces that it's not very descriptive. And this is my argument against Neoplatonism. It's not very descriptive of anything coherent, right? It's a good starting point. It's a launching point for something, but it's not coherent enough to say what your actual goal is, right? And that, I think, is really important.
The reason I like it is because somebody who understands the words post-nominalist Neoplatonism does understand what we're saying, and it helps define us against the postmodernists in a way that doesn't make us sound like reactionary idiots.
Okay, but I think what you'd like, the people that understand that are actually vanishingly small, and they're already polarized. They're either already in our camp or they're already never going to be in our camp. Right?
Look, if you have a better name, I
will consider better names. I'm trying to figure out more what your project is. That was the other problem. Like, when you said, "Oh, this is my project," like, it's post-Platonic, I was like, I have no idea what that means. And I was hoping you could define it, but you know, at the time you couldn't. And you know, maybe
okay, so yeah, I mean, I thought post-Platonic was a convenient container for what we're saying, and I had conversations, and I tried, you know, post-Platonic propositions and stuff, and so what I would say is my project is for this little corner, and frankly, I would like to be able to say this little corner, and I it just hasn't caught on enough, and I don't think it's descriptive enough. But whatever we are doing, people who reject nominalism and understand that postmodernists have a devastating critique of nominalism, but that doesn't mean that Western society, look, in essence, my whole thing is actually Judaism. I actually believe Judaism is true. But
well, look, again, it's you know, you're describing yourself in terms of what you're moving away from or past, and you need to describe yourself in terms of what you're moving towards, right? And that's the fundamental difference.
Yeah, but aren't we sort of moving towards or integrating Platonism into whatever we're doing? Because I like Professor Vervaeke's Silk Road analogy. I'm like, aren't we aiming for a courtyard where we can get different people to talk and to reciprocally reconstruct and do that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, we have a channel on the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord server called The Grove, right? Yeah. And maybe it's something like The Grove is the project, right? Which is where the philosophers used to meet and discuss their practices and discuss philosophy as such, right? Or maybe it's the gym, right? Or maybe it's the academy, right? But I like those ways of talking about it better than this, because it's a very postmodern thing to do. And I don't think the postmoderns have a critique of nominalism. I think the postmoderns are nominalists.
Okay, so I have the final word, and basically the only word I've been able to figure out to describe this is messianism. So I am a messianist, and I am perfectly willing to call this the Messianist Project if other people are. Leave comments, discuss this, make your own videos, or show up to my Hebrew Bible study in 15 minutes.
Thank you,
Bye.
Jacob.